I think that we can have ideas, at least an image of today's first reading. So in all of the second Sundays of Lent, regardless of what year cycle it might be, we hear in the first reading something about Abraham and the Transfiguration story. And so we can kind of get in our minds what that looks like, largely because of images that have been given to us. So most of the time when we see an image of Abraham trying to offer Isaac as a sacrifice, we see this like Abraham as this middle-aged man offering as a sacrifice his 7-year-old son. But I don't think that that's actually accurate. Right, so we know that Sarah gave birth to Isaac when she was 99 years old. So ladies, if you're hoping for something, pray through Sarah. So she gave birth at 99 years old, and so this is from Genesis chapter 22. In chapter 23, we find out that she dies while they're gone, at 137 years old. So we know Isaac's actually 36 or 37 years old. He's a middle-aged man, which means that Abraham's a pretty old dude. Right, so when we think of the image that we typically see of a younger Abraham holding down Isaac, ready to sacrifice him, right, that somewhat makes sense, right, for a middle-aged man to be able to hold down a child. But when Isaac's 37 years old and Abraham's 137 years old, it becomes less likely that Abraham was able to hold down Isaac. I joked with Deacon last night, wherever he went, that we might have a little wrestling match during Mass just to see who would win. He was not pro the idea for some reason. Right? If I were to be attacked by someone who's, closer to 100 than I am, it probably wouldn't be all that much more than just a simple push and they'd fall over. So the thought that Abraham is holding down Isaac is just simply not true. Right? Isaac had to be willing for this to happen to him. It also then makes sense, right? When we think of, again, in these images, oftentimes it's like some sticks that they brought to offer sacrifice. That's not how they offered sacrifice in the Old Testament. Right? It would be such a burning pile that a whole body could be consumed by it. So Isaac had to be able to carry this strap of wood. It's a lot of wood that he's trying to carry. A 7-year-old, even a 9-year-old, even a 15-year-old probably couldn't do that. Right? So it actually reveals something about their relationship. Abraham and Isaac must have had such a relationship that when Abraham said, "Son, I need you to lay down on this stack of wood because I can't physically make you do it, and I need to offer you as a sacrifice," Isaac had to consent to it. It reveals a relationship between the father and the son and what that must have looked like. The kind of trust that Isaac had of his dad. The kind of love that Abraham had for his son, that his son knew it. So we jump to the Transfiguration. Right? Peter, James, and John go with Jesus up this high mountain. And Jesus transfigures before them, right? So when we think of the word trans, right? So transport and other words that have trans in it. Transcendental, I don't know what that word actually means. Other words that have trans in it, it just means change. So his physical appearance changed. That's what that means. In other words, what was going on inside of him was now manifest outside of him. And it goes on. It says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Right? It reveals a father and a son relationship. And then as this father-son relationship is being revealed, as he's going down the mountain, he reveals even more that he's going to have to suffer and die. So it points back to Abraham, but it also points to a relationship between the father and the son. Right? The type of love that must have been present. To trust that that's part of God's will, and I want to go along with it. I think that if we just look at society, I think that there is an active desire amongst certain groups to destroy families. Right? They see family as this bad thing, and they want to make sure it's no more. They think it's actually bad for society. Right? The bedrock of a good society is a strong family. If the family breaks down, society will break down. So we need good families. Right? And that involves the love of a father and a son, or a father and their children. We hear that Jesus' clothes become dazzling white. We also hear in the book of Revelation that Jesus at the heavenly banquet is wearing white. So why is it that, and all those present with him are wearing white, why is it that we put white on people for sacraments? Right? Why is it that a baby wears white on their baptismal day? Is it because they're without sin? No, we know that's not the case. We baptize because of original sin. We recognize that the baby has got sin stuck on it because of the sins of their parents, not necessarily their immediate parents, but Adam and Eve, that they need to be baptized. Right? We see First Communion oftentimes, little kids will wear white. Right? We don't necessarily know this in America. Most of in history, people would actually wear white on their confirmation day, not red. Right? Do you think an 8th grader is without sin? Let me tell you for sure, they have sin. What color does a bride wear on her wedding day? White. What color, if one of her friends also wears a certain color, what color would that be if she gets upset? White. Is it because a bride is without sin? No. And in 2021, that's more and more not the case. Right? It's because what they're aspiring to become. They want to become holy. They want to become a saint. Now, whether they realize that or not, that's why we wear those colors. Right? But we see this breakdown, this societal effort to break down the goodness of the family. And they revel when guys are not acting like good men. I've never given a homily just to men. I've actually given a number of homilies and written public letters for women in the sense of defending them. But I've never given a homily just to men. And I regret that. When I was in seminary, it was the first time that I heard that some of my brother seminarians actually struggled to imagine God as a father. That was a tough thing for them to imagine. And it was always because they had some breakdown in a relationship with their own dad, and they struggled to imagine God being anything like their dad. I've now been in several assignments and interact with a lot of people who also struggle with the idea as God as Father. And almost always they have some poor relationship with their dad. Right, men, you have actually a very important role in everyone's life, regardless if you're a biological father or not. I'm a priest, you call me father, but I don't have any kids, and it would be scandalous if I did. But you still call me father, and I have a responsibility to love you in such a way. Every man's meant to be an image of Jesus. Right? Every man's meant to love like that. Every man's meant to protect, defend, uplift, love, glorify, and serve every person in their life, even if it means they have to die to do so. Why is it that we struggle to hear things like this? Is because there's guys in society that have done a poor job of being an image of that. Right, but the love of a father and a son is so powerful. Right, when we're baptized into the sonship of Jesus, and it has nothing to do with your gender. Male or female, when you're baptized into the sonship of Jesus. You become a beloved child of God through Jesus. So all of us participate in the sonship of God through our baptism. And we should all be able to rely on God the Father in that same way. I have a great relationship with my dad, and my dad's not perfect by any means, but my dad loves me, and I've always known that. My dad told me he loved me all the time. When I was, I think, 17 years old, I actually crashed his car, a car that he had saved up and worked up to get. I was on my way to get Dairy Queen for the both of us, and I crashed it. I raced a Camaro. I won, but I lost in the long run. And so my dad showed up, angry as can be. And as he walked up, all red in the face, ready just to tear into me, lay into me, he said, "You know that I love you, right?" I was like, "I know, Dad." And then he laid into me the way that I needed it. But the whole time that he was yelling at me, I knew, because it was the first thing that he told me, that he loved me. Right, dads, husbands, men in general, when's the last time you just told your family you loved them? Was it only because they accomplished something? They got an A on a test, so you said, "Oh, I love you." Or was it they failed the test and they said, "You know what, I love you"? When was the last time you said something kind to a coworker? Was it only when they did something for you that you needed or wanted? Or was it just because? Hey, it's Tuesday, and you're awesome. Right, the love of a father, a fatherly figure, should change lives. It has certainly affected my life. Growing up in Bloomington, I had a best friend. I'm not going to use his real name, but we'll call him Fred. Fred and I were together all the time. We didn't live really all that far apart. Right across this main road in Bloomington, there was these really nice houses, and I lived on the other side, which was still nicer houses, but not nearly as nice as his house. And I wanted to go to his house all the time. Fred, he had two older sisters, and the two older sisters, when we were in second grade, graduated high school. So they were a few years older than we were. I think it's fair to say, I think Fred's parents would honestly say that they weren't expecting to have another child. And they were a little bit more advanced in age. They probably understood Abraham and Sarah in a certain sense when they got pregnant with Fred. And because of that, Fred's parents were kind of ready to retire pretty early on, but kind of had to also stay around. So oftentimes Fred would come back to either an empty house, or he'd be staying with his grandparents or a babysitter. And he always wanted to come to my house. And I was like, "Dude, you have all the fun games. You have all the newest stuff." He had all the coolest clothes. He had all the newest toys and games. I always wanted to go to Fred's house, and Fred always wanted to go to my house, and I never understood why. Fred started to get into some drugs and drinking when we were just in later grade school, and he really struggled. By the time we were done with 8th grade, he actually had to go to a rehab center just in town because he had grown in addictions. He came back, and our senior year, there was the school bully, and the school bully was picking on me, and Fred fought him. The guy wasn't picking on Fred, but Fred saw that he was picking on me, and Fred fought him. So Fred had to go to another juvenile correction center in Montana for the whole year. He came back right before graduation, and again, obviously I was not enjoying the extracurriculars that he was enjoying, but we still spent a lot of time together. We'd just hang out and catch up. By the time I was a sophomore in college, Fred's dad actually passed away, and so my dad and I went for the wake. And it was obvious that Fred was probably high when we got there, just totally glazed over, not paying attention to anyone that was before him. So as we got in line and we're walking forward to greet Fred, I got up to Fred first and, shook his hand, gave him a hug, said I was sorry for his loss, and "Thanks, Eric. Man, it's good to see you." And then my dad came up, and Fred broke down crying. And I couldn't understand it. I was like, "Dude, we were friends. Why do I not get any kind of emotional response?" And so as the wake was kind of going on, I got a moment just on the side with Fred, and we were kind of talking and catching up on life, and I got to kind of naturally bring up and ask, "Why did you break down when my dad got up there?" And he said, "Eric, you remember when we were kids and I always wanted to go to your house?" And I was like, "Yeah, I remember that." He said, "Do you know why that was the case?" And I said, "No, I never understood why you always wanted to go to my house." I said, "You always had the best toys, the most fun stuff, the newest things, the biggest TV." He said, "All that stuff I would give away just to experience the love of your dad. I wanted to go to your house because your dad was quite obviously in love with his son in a way that my dad was not in love with me. I just wanted to see it, to a little bit experience it." And in, honesty, and I never thought of it that way. And I regretted not noticing it and not being grateful that the love of my dad had for me. Right? My dad's love changed my life. My dad's love changed my friend's life too. My dad's love was so powerful that it affected those around me, my friends. And that's what the love of a father is meant to do. Men, how are you loving those around you? How are you loving your spouse and your children? How are you loving those you work with? How are you treating every woman in your life, regardless if they're standing in front of you or on a screen? How are you treating them? Right? Do they know that you love them? Do you tell them that? The love of a father can do amazing things in someone's life. So as we read these stories of God's love for his beloved son Jesus, as we read these stories of Abraham who loved his son so passionately that his son would be willing to die to fulfill God's will in Abraham's life, you have great power within you, men, to encourage people, to uplift people, to protect people, to be heroes in people's lives. I used to struggle to talk about my dad because he eventually would come visit the parishes and people would think like he was going to have a cape on and have a big red S on his chest. He's only 65 years old, but he looks a lot older. He's got a walker and like oxygen, and it would not take long for me to push him over. And he's my hero. Men, you are heroes in someone's life. Be worthy of the cape that you wear.